Alright, now we're moving into section 4.2, focusing on, again, these factors that are going to influence an ecosystem. So what actually shapes the ecosystem? We've already covered the idea that there's these abiotic factors and biotic factors, and this portion of the chapter is going to look more into the biotic factors. So the living factors, how organisms interact with one another. So first let's define habitat. Habitat is the area where an organism lives. And again, there's these biotic and abiotic factors that are going to determine the survival and growth of an organism and the productivity of the ecosystem in which the organism lives. Another term that is often used is niche. The niche is the full range of physical and biological conditions in which an organism lives and the way in which the organism uses those conditions. So we have the habitat, which include the biotic and abiotic factors, but the niche is really how the organism uses it, the way in which the organism uses those conditions. One way to think about it is if a habitat is the organism's address, its niche is where would be its occupation or job. So what function an animal plays in an ecosystem. And we're going to start in the next couple of slides talking about different functions they can serve. Alright, so these community interactions. So what role does an organism play within kind of the ecosystem? For several ways, and these interactions will have a huge effect on which organisms will survive and continue to thrive. And these interactions are usually caused by different resources. So water, food, shelter, that type of thing. Type of interactions that we're going to be looking at include competition, predation, symbiosis, and of the symbiosis, there's three different components: mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism. Starting off with competition. Competition occurs when organisms of the same or different species attempt to use resources at the same place and the same time. Resources are any necessity of life, and these include water, nutrients, light, food, space. That would also be considered shelter, and again, necessities of life. If competition continues, it could result in the extinction of one of the species involved. And this is based on this idea of the competition exclusion principle. And this states that no two species can occupy the same niche in the same habitat at the same time. So again, they can't have that same occupation and be all right. Things like this, the book used an example of if you have some birds in a tree. I think they had the warblers in a tree, and it's all right. I know, again, my fantastic drawing skills. You have a little birdie. That's my great bird. Anyway, a little beak here. If you had multiple ones of these and maybe they lived in different layers, that would be okay. However, if all of a sudden you have two living in the same kind of area competing for all of the same stuff, at some point it's not going to work because you can really only have kind of one that's going to survive that. Predation. Predation is an interaction in which one organism captures and feeds on the other organism. So it's this idea of this predator-prey relationship. So our predator, again here, is the one that's going to be capturing and feeding, and this is going to be the prey that may or may not get eaten. Symbiosis. Any relationship in which two species live closely together. And again, the three that we're going to cover is mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism. Some of the interactions are good, some are bad, some are not so good. So one type of symbiosis is the idea of mutualism. In this type of relationship, there's going to be two species who are involved, and their involvement in one another are going to benefit each other. So they basically work together, and each of them are benefiting from the relationship. So one example here is many species of flowers and bees. Again, the bees are going to get the pollen, food source, that type of thing, and they are going to carry that as they move from flower to other ones, thus cross-pollinating some of them. Another example, a common one, is the oxpecker and like a zebra. The oxpecker is this little bird, and it sits on zebras and also rhinos, and eats ticks and other parasites that are going to live on these animals. So the oxpecker is getting its food source, and the zebra is benefiting from getting some of the ticks or the other parasites out. So mutualism, it's good for both. Our next example of a symbiotic relationship is commensalism. Commensalism is when one of the species benefits from the interaction, but the other is neither helped nor harmed. So this idea of barnacles and whales. So barnacles are these small marine animals, and they attach to whales. They don't really provide any type of benefit to the whales themselves. However, they're benefiting from the water that's getting passed through them. It's constant movement of water, and the water also carries food particles to them. So they're basically their food source. So the barnacles are getting their food source, while the whales are not really getting any type of benefit, but they're also not being harmed. That's the important indicator for this type of relationship. The third and final one that we're going to discuss is parasitism. So this is where one organism lives on or inside another organism and harms it. So these are common examples are ticks and tapeworms. So again, parasitism, one is going to be harmed from it.